VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon. Vic Eliason, your host today, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things. This is one of those days when I've got a stack of stuff here on the desk. We've got to clear it off. A new week's coming up here around the corner, and we certainly need to be covering. I've got enough here to go for at least 3 days, but I don't plan to do that. But today we have a number of items. Here we have an item called disorderly prayers. This comes to us from World News. Let me tell you the story. It goes like this. Pastors and lay people are arrested for praying in protest of New York's ban on church meeting in public schools. Now, in plain language, we're talking about churches that may rent facilities because they either need a church building, or they're building a church, or maybe they're just starting to have some meetings. And the freedom to utilize facilities, public facilities, in most states have made it totally legal. But they pay rent, and just like anybody else. And to discriminate against religious purposes would be, in my book, unconstitutional. Well, here it is. Newsline. New York City police Thursday arrested 43 New York City pastors and lay people who were protesting the city's ban on church use of public schools for worship services. The ban is scheduled to go into effect February the 12th. Unbelievable. The arrests came after more than 200 people gathered in the rain outside a Bronx public school where Mayor Bloomberg was giving his State of the City address. And after singing songs and cheering speeches, protesters walked out in orderly groups of 5 to 8 to kneel in front of barricades and pray. And the police warned them to leave, and then made arrests on charges of disorderly conduct for praying. Well, the story goes on. The New York Board of Education wants to ban religious use of schools on Sunday mornings or at other times that the schools are otherwise unused, even though the churches rent the space, dropping an estimated several $1 million per year into the city cash box. And if the ban prevails, more than 150 congregations will have to move to other meeting places starting next month. And that's hard to find in New York City, that's for sure. Now, last Thursday, police arrested New York City councilman and pastor Fernando Cabrera, Pastor Bill Devlin, and 5 others on charges of criminal trespass. Now get that, that's one of those was New York City councilman. Their alleged trespass was kneeling and singing 2 hymns outside the doors of the New York City Law Department. Police held them in custody for 3 hours. Then the following day, the New York Housing Authority reversed its position to evict churches that meet inside of community centers. Board of Education officials stuck with their ban, though saying it will protect the minds of impressionable youth. It's going to protect their minds by throwing the churches out of the rented facilities. On Monday, more than 100 persons from different ethnic, income, and denominational backgrounds held a prayer meeting at Calvary Baptist Church in Midtown Manhattan. The prayer event concluded a citywide week of fasting and prayer on behalf of pastors and council members who are working to overturn the ban. Now, Bronx pastor Salberos said that the ban would be particularly harmful in poorer communities. Churches in the boroughs like Queens and the Bronx successfully battle crime and poverty, and uprooting them is destructive. He pointed to the lower crime rates, help for the poor and homeless, and educational assistance for children as examples of what the churches contribute. The Bronx pastor, who has battled homicides in his own neighborhood and been held at gunpoint 6 times, has been on a hunger strike since January and says he won't eat until the ban's overturned. Attempts at a legislative fix are underway. New York Assemblyman Nelson Castro has informed or introduced a bill which will allow the use of school buildings and school sites for religious meetings and worship when not in use for school purposes, and when such service or worship is deemed non-disruptive of normal school operations. What a fuss. Well, there are organizations, among them one in Wisconsin called the Freedom From Religion Foundation. You notice the unbiased name, Freedom From Religion. But it's there. And that's what's happening in New York this week. Now, this is datelined January 17th, Stockholm, Sweden. A leader of Sweden's Liberal Party last week called for a change in the country's social services law so that the government can take away children from homeschooling families more easily by allowing social workers to do so. You heard me. Now, I want you to know that many years ago, one of my relatives was there were six areas in Sweden, and each of those had a police force, much like, you have a international police force, something of this nature. Well, this was a national police force, and one of those relatives was in my family tree. He played the violin, would you believe? He's a concert violinist, but he was also a law enforcement officer and headed up one of the entire regions in Sweden. And he was telling me this. He said, Vic, we need to change the social mores. Now, he was not a believer, at least to our knowledge. But he says what we need to do is change the social mores in Sweden to somehow bring a different outcome, a different behavior. Well, just like it was a mechanical thing. Well, may I say this? You're seeing some of that outcome right now. Now, they're calling for a change that comes amidst already stringent penalties in Sweden for homeschooling. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association and Alliance Defense Fund have applied to the European Court of Human Rights on behalf of one family whose child was abducted by the government in 2009 and have filed a brief in a Swedish appellate court on behalf of another family fined an equivalent in the U.S. dollars of $26,000. The right of parents to choose the kind of education their children receive is a fundamental human right recognized in international legal documents, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, that was said by HSLDA attorney Michael Donnelly. Sweden has lost its way and is ignoring basic human rights, joining Germany in repressing educational freedom. It's important that free people stand up to governments who persecute their own people. And I happen to know we have listeners to this network that are in Sweden, and I hope you're listening. Liberal Party politician Lotta Edholm, looked like Edblom. Lotta Edholm called for the change to the country's social services law in January 10, a column in a prominent Swedish newspaper. And Edholm then wrote on her blog, "Today I write with Anne Catherine Aslan on the debate page for the social services law should be amended so that the social services are able to intervene when children are kept away from school by their parents, often for religious or ideological reasons." Lord have mercy on Sweden. We move along to other stories that are before us. We see all kinds of excitement going on in Washington with the change of the profile of those who are aspiring to become the new leader of our country. Of course, we hear the names of Perry and on goes Romney, and then you have Gingrich and many other names that are flashed around. But, of course, we understand within today's news, Mr. Perry has dropped out of the presidential race. And as in so doing, he has endorsed Newt Gingrich, a move that comes just 2 days before the South Carolina Republican primary. Now, the Texas governor is saying that he will return to his state with pride. He announced in South Carolina that there is no visible plan or path forward for me in this 2012 campaign, he said. After surging to the front of the GOP field upon entering the race last summer, Perry struggled to sustain that support and endured disappointing finishes in the leadoff in Iowa and New Hampshire contests. Now, he said Thursday that he entered the race with a sense of calling, but realizes when it's time to make a strategic retreat. He says, "I've always believed the mission is greater than the man," says Perry. Now, the Texas governor offered a brief and robust endorsement of the former House Speaker, Mr. Gingrich, on his way out of the race, calling him a conservative visionary. That's what he called him. And while Perry is polling only in single digits in South Carolina, his endorsement could make a significant difference in tightening the contest between Mr. Gingrich and Mr. Romney. So there we see it. I'm not sure how you're reacting to that announcements. If the election were held today in your state, who would you vote for? Seems to be confusion in the ranks because everybody, like bouncing rubber balls, have bounced clear to the top and then come sliding back down, and somebody else takes their place. It's like dropping a bunch of ping pong balls out on the hard floor. Everything's bouncing up and down. Well, former Massachusetts Mitt Romney apparently did not win the Iowa Caucuses after all, it says here. Former Senator Rick Santorum, who trailed by a mere 8 votes in the initial tally, actually beat Romney by 34 votes according to the certified vote totals. The Des Moines Register broke the story at 7 a.m. just a few hours ago. Thursday, a few hours before the Iowa Republican Party planned to release the final numbers. But in another twist, the final numbers are not reliable because the 8 Iowa precincts could not have their totals certified. The Register reported a Republican Party official told the newspaper it's a split decision. Well, the certified numbers are as follows. Rick Santorum ended up with 29,839 votes, 168 fewer than the 30,007 he had on caucus night. Now, Romney ended up with 29,805 votes. That's 210 fewer than the 30,015 initially posted after the balloting. But the Register says that it says that the 8 precincts are irreversibly missing and what would never be certified. So we're going to be watching with interest as to the numbers. Again, it put Rick Santorum on the top with 29,839. We've got so much stuff here. We're going to be sharing it with you, and hopefully we'll open some lines and get some opinions on this. If you're voting today, who would you vote for? We'll be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what was the Earth's atmosphere like in the past?
Chris, it is hard to reconstruct the past atmosphere with any certainty. We do know that some of the giant insects would seemingly have needed a great deal more oxygen than is present today. But this has been a problem, because if there was more oxygen, perhaps wildfires would get started and would not stop. A recent experiment showed, though, that while increased oxygen causes an increased fire hazard, if the earth were more moist, then it would balance back out. Creationists do propose that the world before the flood was very different, more moist with perhaps more oxygen, but more water vapor too. Chris, it's really hard to reconstruct that world before the flood. It's just totally gone. But what we know shows us that the world hinted at back in Genesis is scientifically plausible.
Thanks, Dr. Morris. For more on creation, visit our website at www.icr.org.
Okay, we're back with you. And that question again, if you were voting today, who would you vote for? We have all of these people who have bounced to the top and then come sliding down. Life News reports the head of the pro-life women's group. This is a statement in one of the first endorsements for the former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum. Following this weekend's meeting of evangelical and social conservative leaders that had them supporting his campaign, the head of the pro-life women's group has backed the GOP president hopeful. Now, Penny Nance, the president and CEO of Concerned Women for America, issued an endorsement for Santorum in her personal capacity, not speaking on behalf of the organization that represents hundreds of thousands of pro-life women. She said, "I'm excited to endorse Rick Santorum for President of the United States." She said in a statement that Life News received. Rick has been a champion for faith, family, and freedom for nearly 2 decades. When a leader was needed on Capitol Hill, he was always known that you could go to Rick Santorum and to ensure the conservative values were enhanced. And she goes on, says, Rick led the fight to end partial birth abortion, reform welfare, and fight radical Islam. I have no doubt that Santorum administration will continue to fight for conservatism and our founding principles. I am proud to stand with Rick, she says, and I look forward to working with him and his campaign to defeat President Obama. That was stated by Penny Nance, who is the president of Concerned Women for America. Interesting. Then here comes all of the details and the stuff that falls out of the closet in the lives of various campaign or those who are campaigning for the presidency. Now here we have Mr. Romney. And here is this, 2 of the leaders of the American Center for Law and Justice. That's known as the ACLJ. One of the top pro-life legal firms in the nation have issued endorsements for Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, who is a Mormon. Now, Jay Sekulow and Jordan Sekulow say that they strongly support Romney in his bid to win the GOP nomination in the battle to replace Barack Obama. And they said in order for conservatives to make the changes in Washington that we have been fighting for, we must first defeat Barack Obama and have a leader with a proven record of getting things done. That's what Jay Sekulow said. And he said Mitt Romney is one of the candidates who can take his pro-growth message to the American people and defeat President Obama. Well, that's what Mr. Sekulow says. Interesting. Now, here is an interesting article, also dateline today, underscoring the prominent, if little discussed, role that Mitt Romney played as a Mormon leader. The private equity giant, once run by the GOP presidential frontrunner, carved his church a slice of several of the most lucrative business deals securities records now show, proving it with millions of dollars worth of stock in some of Bain Capital's most well-known holdings. Romney had always been a major donor to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which requires that members tithe or give 10% of their income to the church. And his family charity, called the Tyler Foundation, has given more than $4 million to the church in the past 5 years, including $1.8 million in 2008 and $600,000 in 2009. But because Romney, whose fortune has been estimated at $250 million, has never released his personal tax returns, the full extent of his giving has never been made public. Newly uncovered stock contributions made during the Romney-Bain days suggests that there is another dimension to Romney's support for the church, one that could involve millions more than has been previously disclosed. As a part of just one of the Bain transactions in 2008 involving the investment in Burger King holdings, filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission revealed that an unnamed Bain partner donated 65,326 shares of Burger King stock He donated to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints holdings, then worth approximately $1.9 million. There were numerous others giving the church a stake in other Bain properties, such as Domino's Pizza, the electronic manufacturer DDI, the Phosphates Company, Infos Holdings, and Marquee Holdings, the parent of AMC Theaters. Now, the Republican candidate campaign staff confirmed that some of the stock transactions were at Romney's direction, but they would not say which ones. Well, here you have a man who is investing heavily in the Mormon Church. One of the things also, in order to be a Mormon, you must make a pledge of sovereign submission to even beyond the government. You must be submissive to the church. And so there you have an interesting dimension. Here we have a rising interest in Mr. Romney. Along comes now Rick Santorum, and there are those who have signed on. But then it blows you away with more confusement. And I'm not trying to delve into the dregs of political muck. But there have been many people of recent that have signed on to support Mr. Gingrich. And now recently, an ABC interview with Newt Gingrich's second wife, meaning his ex-wife, told that the Republican presidential candidate sought an open marriage and that his campaign positions do not coincide with what she saw during their 18 years of marriage. I'm not going to go into the gory, gross details, except to say that there's a history here that's been made public, and it certainly adds one more layer of confusion. We find people who are very astute in the area of political science and understanding how budgets and finances work, and we look for leadership that is pristine and representative of the American values. And then you find those that are utilizing funds to promote doctrines and religious beliefs that are contrary to Christian beliefs. And I say that because I am aware that in Mormonism they believe that Jesus Christ and Satan are kid brothers. That's right. Their doctrines that Jesus and Satan or Lucifer are related. They're brothers. And so, folks, we're dealing with a very serious situation. How do you make up your mind and who you vote for? Is it based on their spiritual heritage? Is it based on their economic understanding, though they may live a life that is involved in adulterous relationships? How do you handle this? How do you make a decision in this cloudy environment? And if there's ever a time we need to pray for God to give wisdom and guidance, it's now. But even as the bewilderment that goes on, if there is division and confusion in the ranks of the GOP, and there does not come to the front a man that is agreeable for those who choose to vote in the GOP contest as to who will be the opponent to the president in the final balloting, if it's a split vote, if it's confusion, there are those that say, well, it's an automatic election of the president who is in power right now. But who is going to take the place? Who can people rely on for leadership? And we have those who may have great ideas, even in the area of conservative views. But there are those who say, well, we just don't. I mean, there's one leader who seems to have conservative views, but when it comes to worrying about Iran and nuclear weapons, oh, that's a long ways off. I don't believe that. You can if you want to. But you find people who are in some ways very educated and very smart, in other ways very naive. And so how do we make up our minds? And we're going to be talking about this today, hopefully. In a few minutes, we're going to open the lines here and give us a chance to chat. But as we see all of the issues that are before us, I mean, there are people today that are their spiritual life is literally being challenged as they live in other countries. There are people that come to literally kill them if need be. We see the honor killings that are happening within the Islamics. And then we see the Supreme Court turning away a prayer case. That's right. From time to time, the Supreme Court dealing with some of these issues. Here's one called the prayer case. Prayer, or praying before public meetings if you like, just don't mention the name of Jesus. For the time being, that's the law for states falling under the jurisdiction of the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. You heard me. That's the law. As the U.S. Supreme Court declined Tuesday to hear a case arising from North Carolina. In March 2007, the American Civil Liberties Union and Americans United for the Separation of Church and State sued the Forsyth County Commission on behalf of 3 people who said they were offended by hearing commissioners open the public meetings with prayers that named deities. According to the original lawsuit, the group wants to ban invited speakers from including reference to Jesus Christ or any other sectarian deity as a part of their prayers. Boy, talk about sanitized prayers. Well, folks, this is not just Supreme Court level. I understand that this is a big issue in Ashland, Wisconsin. And got a phone call from the Ashland government there. We're looking forward to getting more information on it. But I understand that the pattern of having prayer during a council meeting or to open a council meeting, the possibility of it now being changed to a moment of silence. Now, there are those within the Ashland Council that are saying they would like to leave it as it is. But there are also those that say, no, we don't want controversy, and we're just going to go for a moment of silence. Well, let me ask, who's being silenced here? Who is being silenced? It used to be that we had a freedom of our belief. And if you bring in a man who is a Christian and you ask for a sanitized prayer, I mean, this is coming to the most ridiculous things where prayer is now having to be custom designed for fear you mention the name of Jesus Christ. My Bible says at that name, every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. As a believer in Christ, that name's precious to us. But we have people like the Freedom from Religion Foundation and others who, wherever the opportunity comes, seek to silence the name of Jesus. I still believe that name is powerful. And I hope there are people listening up in the Ashland area that will respond. You may not know this, but your council is dealing with the issue of even having prayer at their meetings and having to sanitize it now and say, well, we won't really pray, we'll just have a moment of silence. We'll be right back. And we're going to open our phone lines for your calls. Our telephone number is 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Let's talk about it. The lines are open. This is Crosstalk.
This is a time of unprecedented opportunity for the pro-life movement. As exhibited by the current debate over government-run health care, the public is having profound second thoughts about abortion, and more people are labeling themselves as pro-life. Better yet, this trend is growing among the young. Meanwhile, the opposition is having a more difficult time selling their agenda. The number of abortion clinics in America is plummeting from a high of more than 2,000 to less than 750 today. This has resulted in a significant drop in the number of children killed. In the book On Message, author Mark Crutcher says this is no time to relax, but a time to educate new people on the pro-life message. On Message provides solid answers to the toughest questions posed by pro-abortionists. To obtain your copy of On Message, send a donation of $15 or more to VCY America, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. To contribute by phone, call 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk. I'm holding in my hands a fax that I got from the Ashland City Hall. In fact, it was sent to me directly by Bill Whalen, the mayor of Ashland, Wisconsin. And the message is basically this, and I read it to you. An update on discussion of prayer at council meetings. In Committee of the Whole, Councillor Eads, Councillor Westland, seconded to amend the procedure as outlined in Ordinance 51 to include a moment of silence in lieu of prayer. The voice vote was 9-2. Now, Councillors Dorsch and Pufel opposed the change. And this has got to go to the council meeting on January 31st. And folks, if you're in Ashland and are not aware of this, you should be. There's efforts to change the procedure. Now, the ordinance of allowing prayer has been in effect since 1979 for 33 years. And to codify the moment of silence as a method of prayer is giving up any future right granted by the Supreme Court for a future mayor or future council to use formal prayer without an ordinance change. The Ashland Area Ministerial Association was asking for a discussion, not a formal ordinance change. Now, may I just say this, if you're in the Ashland, Wisconsin area, you can call and talk to your mayor. That's Mayor Bill Whalen, and the phone number there is 715-682-7033. 715-682-7033. Or if you'd like to email him, it's bwhalen, that's BWHALEN, at COAWI.org. That's COAWI.org. And let him know what you think. This is your community, and I've got the minutes of the whole meeting. And may I say that this issue is one of seriousness. Goodness. Now we're going to outlaw prayer. I wonder, considering all of this fear of the name of Jesus, are they going to outlaw cursing too? Let's go to the phones. We're going to talk with John in West Milwaukee. John, you are on the air. Welcome to Crosstalk.
Yes, evening. Afternoon.
Afternoon, yes.
Yes. Anyway, with
I'm a
Michelle
morning person.
Bachmann, the running here, I think there's only one candidate, and that would be Ron Paul. That's the only one I'd vote for. He's the bio there, and he's a Christian.
Well, sir, let me just ask this: he's a man that doesn't believe that Iran is preparing an atomic bomb.
Well,
no, that's not well. That's dangerous.
Well, I think going to war is kind of insane. I mean.
So you don't think that Israel should be protected?
Oh, there we are. Okay, we're trying to serve two masters. I get it.
Well, no, I'm talking about humanity, sir. And I realize we have a bunch of people who are anti-Jew or Jew haters, but our topic today, John, is not that, okay? Thank you for your call. Let's go to Alabama and talk with Ron. Ron, you're on the air.
Hi, I'd just like to talk about how far we're drifting away as Christians. We kind of... the world keeps moving, getting worse and worse, and we kind of keep moving in the same direction. We weren't, as a Christian, we aren't where we were 100 years ago. We keep on moving with the world. And I believe it's the same thing with conservatives. 100 years ago, I believe we were way more conservative, and we keep drifting, become more and more liberal, and we vote for people that are more and more liberal. Years ago, I would have voted for Ron Paul, but right now, I just feel he's the most conservative we have, and that's what we need to go take a step back.
And when you say conservative, yeah, okay, sir. When you say conservative, what are you define conservative for me? Would you?
Well, I believe that we should have more morals in this country. Follow the Bible.
Okay, but
to have get rid of abortion. We need to get out a lot of countries where we're at as far as troops. Just kind of a lot of different things.
Okay, now when you say kind of and a lot of different things, and all of us hate war. Listen, I grew up as a little kid seeing war on the newsreels during our lunch hour in the school. I remember the fear that even in the heart of a little kid, Every time we heard an airplane go over, I wondered if it was the Germans coming to bomb us.
Right.
And I was way up in northern Minnesota. So nobody likes war. But sometimes war is, even in Bible times, it was something that was necessary because there was an evil empire that was about to destroy God's people.
Right.
Now, let me ask a question. Are you one of those pacifists that if someone came with a gun to attack your family, that you just stand there and let them do it?
Oh, definitely not.
Really?
Definitely not. And Jesus wasn't a pacifist either.
Okay.
And I agree with Jesus. We got to destroy at times to protect ourselves.
Well, the issue, what about when it comes to national destruction? When we're talking about wars, or what about the defense of our country? Now,
that's a disagreement I kind of do have with Ron Paul. I'm not sure how serious he is on some of this stuff.
Well, how serious?
Yeah, I do disagree with that.
Well, let me ask the question then, my friend.
Okay.
That's a pretty serious one, isn't it? I mean, if you're seriously concerned about Mr. Paul's view on that, and I'm not here to promote or cut him down, but we've got to ask hard questions. If you say that does concern you, and I mean, our nation can be destroyed for lack of defense.
Right.
And that is pretty serious, isn't it?
But the Lord's also going to destroy us from within if we don't become a more moral nation.
Okay.
And I believe none of the candidates really have that. I mean, I know Romney doesn't, Gingrich doesn't.
What do you know what about Santorum?
We got to take care of our country first, and then look beyond that.
What about what's your feelings about Santorum? I don't know that much about him.
I like him.
Why?
I don't know a lot either about him personally, but he's got good views, and I think he could be the best.
Okay,
no doubt. But I don't know if he has a chance. We'll see when the next few primaries.
So you're kind of open to look over the scene there.
Yes, I don't like Gingrich nor Romney as far as being conservative for this country, but I do like Santorum and Ron Paul, I think.
Okay. Appreciate the call. I got to move along. We've got other calls coming in right now. We're going to go to Burlington, Wisconsin. Our phone number, 800-733-9829. By the way, this was just handed to me. An interesting news thing. Is Ron Paul defending Islam? This is a question. And when the subject in South Carolina's Republican presidential debate turned toward America's war with Islamic terrorists, Representative Ron Paul echoed a position he's held for some time. He blamed America first and suggested that as president he would employ his version of the Golden Rule, treating other countries as we would like to be treated. The implication was that the Islamic terrorists attack America because America bullies Islamic countries. Now, the former PLO member, Waleed Shubat, insists that this is an extremely flawed position that benefits America's enemies. When I was an activist, says Waleed, I knew exactly what the goal was. It was to take over America in the name of Islam. I had absolutely nothing to do with America's treatment of Muslim countries. And Shubat believes that Mr. Paul should be better vetted when it comes to his positions, saying that far too many of the congressman's positions get the Islamists' seal of approval. Interesting observation. Let's go to Burlington, and we're talking to Eddie, is it, or is it Edie?
Edie.
Edie, you're on the air. Go ahead.
I get very worried about Ron Paul. In the beginning, I was interested, and still am, with auditing the Federal Reserve and possibly getting rid of it, which would be tremendous. However, he concerns me with his positions on things like the possible legalization of drugs, the possible legalization of prostitution, all these things. They cannot help our country. It is the surest road that we have to our country's destruction. Our Constitution was set up so that we would elect godly and Christian men. None of the founders had any trouble whatsoever in declaring clearly the name of Jesus Christ, the gospel, all of it. They had no trouble with it. We need people with that kind of outlook, that kind of spine, and that kind of moral compass. We need it desperately back. So I really feel that as we look at these candidates, we have to look at them through that lens. And at this point, I really feel that maybe it's time for the Constitution Party. Chuck Baldwin is a pastor. Mm-hmm. He supports the family. We need to reestablish the family desperately. That was God's first government.
You know, Edie, the issue, of course, is discussion with these moments of indecision, and there's going to be some primaries coming up not too far away. Mm-hmm. The question is, and I know this name is thrown, or this term is thrown around, electability.
Right.
Is someone electable, or is it just a name that we have empathy for? And that's bewildering. I don't have any answers to it. I agree. It is a very baffling thing.
The closest I can come right now is Rick Santorum.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Edie. Mm-hmm. From Burlington, Wisconsin, we go to Fort Scott, Kansas, and we're talking with Gary. Gary, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. And my comments for the people that's upset about praying to Jesus Christ, and they should understand that our nation was founded under biblical values, and that we should all start our prayer with, we are going to pray to the Lord Jesus Christ, which every elected official swears on a holy oath to the Bible, Holy Bible, and that's Jesus of the Holy Bible. And, you know, if they're offended, so be it. If they don't want to listen, they can walk out.
Well, I thank you, Gary. Thanks for sharing it. God bless you, my friend. Let's move along. Pensacola, Florida. Next, our phone number, 800-733-9829. Bill in Pensacola.
Hey, good afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned Romney earlier, and I'm a Christian, but I do know other Christians who will not vote for Romney because he is a Mormon. I do not have that opinion. I'm actually a Paul supporter, but I don't share Paul's views on, I think if Iran gets a nuke, I think Israel needs to nuke them. And the reason I don't want to sacrifice ground troops, and that's what our politicians do now, in my opinion. Back in World War II, we would bomb. We'd do mass bombings before we send in ground troops. Now, our politicians, in my opinion, like I said, sacrifice our ground troops, and I'm, obviously opposed to that. But I have no problem with someone else nuking them, or even we could nuke them. I just don't want to lose any of our soldiers on the ground if that's unnecessary.
Bill, thanks for sharing your heart. From Pensacola, we move on to Randy in Wisconsin. Our phone number, 800-733-9829. Got a vacant line right now. Hello, you're on the air. Hello, Randy.
Hey, I was just calling to just say that I think that we should vote as Christians for a president who is going to uphold the Constitution. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the oath that the president takes when he is elected. He takes an oath to defend and uphold the Constitution.
Okay. We thank you very much for that thought, and we're going to move right along here as the theme has come up and told us we've got about 8 minutes after the break. We're going to come back. By the way, what about this issue of the blow to our economy, dealing with the Keystone Pipeline and the president's idea to not go ahead with it? I mean, the jobs and the income and the oil. Give us some thoughts on that, too. We'll be right back.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewweekend.com. In his book, Hide or Seek, Dr. James Dobson reportedly wrote, quote, lack of self-esteem produces more symptoms of psychiatric disorders than any other factor yet identified, end quote. I believe the problem with Dr. Dobson's statement is that it is not only unbiblical, but I believe it's not accepted by many experts. When two doctors studied more than 200 criminals, did they discover they suffered from low self-images? No, to the contrary. They discovered that of the lot, there was not a single criminal who believed he was evil. Each criminal thought of himself as basically a good person, even when planning a crime. I believe the reality is that man's problem is they love themselves too much. They esteem themselves too highly. That's the issue of a sin nature. Martin Lloyd-Jones accurately wrote, quote, one of the best tests of whether we're truly a Christian or not is this: do I hate my natural self? End quote. For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House.
And I was making some comment about the issue of that Keystone XL pipeline and the president's rejection of it. A comment from the National Association of Manufacturers, National Association, the NAM. The president and CEO, Jay Timmons, issued a statement regarding the Obama administration's rejection of the Keystone XL pipeline project. He said the president's rejection of the pipeline project is a serious blow to job creation and a major setback to energy security. The decision to say no to a project that would create 20,000 manufacturing and construction jobs with an additional 118,000 indirect jobs defies logic when the U.S. is suffering from high unemployment and a struggling economy. For America's future, it's always better to choose sound policy over politics. Instead, the writer says, the administration followed the political winds and rejected a clear way to create jobs. Well, your thoughts. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce put it this way. In response to reports that President Obama will deny the Keystone XL pipeline permit, U.S. Chamber of Commerce President Thomas Donahue issued the following statement today. He said the political decision offers hard evidence that creating jobs is not a high priority for this administration. So back to the phone lines, which are at this moment jammed, except, they're all ringing here. Let's go to Brad in West Allis, Wisconsin. And Brad, you're on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to call and say that as Christians, we need to vote. And I know that we're going to be stuck with one of these four Republicans that are there now. Mm-hmm. But we already know what we've got, and that pipeline thing is a prime example. He also just recently cut off mining of uranium anywhere near the Grand Canyon. That's more natural resources that we can't have. He's been saying no to any of the oil drilling that our oil companies want to do. Everything is no, no, no when it comes to something that's going to actually help us. We know what we've got. We know he's pro-death on top of it. He said before he was even elected that he'd be willing to see his grandchild put to death prior to birth if his daughter was pregnant out of wedlock. He wouldn't punish her with a baby, he said. So we know what we've got now. So Christians need to vote anyway. You may not like the choice. It may be between bad and worse, but don't sit home. Otherwise, we're going to end up with 4 more years of this guy.
All right, sir. Thanks for your call, Brad.
Thank you.
Moving along, and we're going to go to Lynn in Alabama. And Lynn, you're on the air. Lynn, go ahead.
Okay.
Hello?
Can't people understand that our president can do anything he wants to do, and the whole United States sits back and lets him do anything he wants to do? And it's like that they're blinded to what he's doing. And he's the interim to the Antichrist. He's paving the way for the Antichrist.
Well, when you think of overthrows of government, when you think of overthrow of countries, when you think of this, it is, first of all, an overthrow has to be stimulated by turmoil. And if you can start a rebellion, look what happened down there in Egypt. Yeah. And they tried it here with Occupy, and all they did was attract tons of rats into Washington. I say that not trying to be funny, but that's...
Oh, no, I know.
Well, we talked about that here this week.
Every day.
But the issue, again, when you throw God out and the values that God's Word presents, and we disregard that which is righteous, I think the Bible tells us when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people mourn. And one has to ask the question, are the people rejoicing today, or are they mourning?
Well, it looks like they need to be mourning because the Christians are not standing up and fighting for what they should be believing in. If they believe in God, then they need to stand up and fight for God.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Appreciate that from Alabama. Got to move quickly. Destin in Illinois. And Destin, you're on the air. Hello, sir.
Hi.
You're on.
Yes. Got you, Vic. Dustin Hawkins?
Yes.
Hey, thank you, sir. Hey, I just wanted to say, and I want you to know that I really appreciate your show, although there are times I kind of have a little bit of question trying to put your show together with Brandon House, because sometimes you guys seem to contradict each other, and it always strikes me funny, I guess. One thing that a caller said earlier was about regarding Ron Paul. Mm-hmm. She had mentioned that she liked Chuck Baldwin, and I noticed that there was really no disagreement with her or anything, and I'll be honest with you, I like Chuck Baldwin. I voted for him back in 2008 because I refused to go into the polling booth and vote for someone that I didn't believe in. So I voted for Chuck Baldwin rather than going ahead and voting for the Republican candidate, John McCain. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is Chuck Baldwin would have thrown his support behind Congressman Ron Paul had Ron Paul received the nomination. Mr. Baldwin's on record saying that he is a very big fan of Congressman Paul, and I think for good reason.
Well, let me ask you a question, sir, because this isn't, of course, a promoting of any political candidates, but we have to ask a reasonable question. Is first of all, is the candidate, you write his name in, or whatever, is he, and the term, I'm going to use it, is he electable?
Sure.
No, is he electable?
Is who electable?
Mr. Baldwin.
Mr. Baldwin? Oh, I think Mr. Baldwin would be electable. Well,
but I mean, you can think that, and I'm not saying he couldn't be if the majority of people, but why isn't he out there with the others right now? Sure. Did he appear with them in the contests?
Well, I honestly, Vic, was just bringing up Chuck Baldwin as a way of saying that I think Ron Paul,
Well, sir, yeah, Ron Paul, we're not promoting any candidates, and frankly, we're out of time. But I want to thank you for your call, Destin, and I wish we had more time to spend, but we are out of time. We are facing a dilemma. We need to pray for our country. In these hours of uncertainty, we need to be praying that God will give us wisdom as we seek to vote, and to pray that God will deal even with those in power. And our prayers for government aren't simply God bless them if they're doing wrong things. Maybe it's God judge them or God deal with them. We've got a lot of praying to do. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.